On this edition of the CBS Video Library of World War II, we will focus on the war as it was fought in the skies over Europe. We will fly with the U.S. Army Air Force as it mounts mission after mission against one of the most difficult targets of the war, the Romanian oil refineries of Ploiești. We'll be in the plains as B-17 bombers fly a raid deep into German territory. Their target, Schweinfurt. 800 bombers set out to destroy the German U-boat factories in the city of Hamburg. We'll recount the story of that raid. And our final chapter will deal with the German development of what was then a new kind of aerial war machine, the guided missile. We begin with an armada of American B-24 bombers having taken off from an airfield in North Africa, flying 1,200 miles at treetop level toward a crucial target in Romania.
August 1st, 1943, 177 American B-24s built to bomb at high altitudes, coming into the target at 30 feet. The single richest target in Europe lays before them. They hope to win it by surprise. They hope to be on it before the enemy can organize his defenses. A gamble, a carefully rehearsed blow at the heart of the enemy's war machine. The objective is oil. The Romanian oil field under attack is Ploiești. Ploiești is a complex of oil storage depots, refineries, and cracking plants. It is the richest target in all Europe because it supplies 1/3 of the oil needed by the German war machine. We must destroy this target. A modern army does not travel on its belly, it travels on petroleum. Ploiești powers the German army. On August 1st, 1943, our tactics called for a single surprise raid against the oil fields. The airmen approaching this target had seen an intelligence film based on reports by our agents in Romania and on captured documents. Now, a portion of the actual briefing film.
The defenses are nothing like as strong here as they are on the Western Front. The fighter defenses at Ploiești are not strong, and the majority of the fighters will be flown by Romanian pilots who are thoroughly bored with the war. The anti-aircraft defenses of Ploiești are estimated at 80 heavy AA guns and 160 light AA guns. These again have largely been disposed for a night attack coming from the south along the railroad. The heavy ack should not trouble you at low altitude. All the anti-aircraft guns are manned by Romanians, and so there's a pretty good chance that there may be incidents like there were in Italy at the beginning of the war, when civilians could not get into the shelters because they were filled with anti-aircraft gunners. Reports have been received that machinery for making smoke screens has been installed. The smoke screens have not, however, proved successful against daylight attacks. Now, the defenses of Ploiești may look formidable on paper, but remember they are manned by Romanians.
At low altitude, everything goes by in a hurry. You even think in a hurry. And I remember thinking on this run-in, we could have taken more gas and left the parachutes. All a parachute is weight at this altitude. We wouldn't have time for it to open.
These planes have traveled 1,200 miles from Africa. We were gambling. We didn't have the strength for a major attack. Perhaps a sudden raid, a thrust with a light force would win Ploiești with a single blow. But navigation at a low altitude is difficult, and something went wrong. The first group had reached this point 1/2 hour before it was due over Ploiești. The run-up to the target was to begin here at Florești. But the lead group made a navigational error and turned short at this point. And unfortunately, it began a run on Bucharest. Bucharest was the headquarters of the German Air Defense Command. As the planes ran toward Bucharest, there was a moment of indecision. Then radio silence was broken and the lead plane was informed of its error. The group was approaching the outskirts of the city. The element of surprise was lost. The Germans were warned. Only one target in the area was worth the effort, Ploiesti. The Germans sounded the alert. It was answered not by second-rate Romanian flyers, but by some of the best pilots in the Luftwaffe. The German anti-aircraft artillery moved into action. All surprise was lost. German flak was waiting and ready. The first wave belatedly turned towards Ploiesti and approached from the most heavily defended direction. Some planes of the first wave were forced to bomb targets not assigned to them.
When we came in, we saw it. We'd timed it just wrong. The delayed action bombs of the first wave were going off ahead of us and under us. We went out after targets and hit them on the button. In spite of delayed action bombs going off below us, flak, small arms, everything but slingshots, we barreled through and unloaded. Twelve of my outfit went into the smoke. Only 9 broke out on the other side.
A B-24 will climb on 3 engines and limp on 2. When you have to feather one of the propellers, that's a sign you're already crippled. German fighters will try to finish the kill. There's nothing you can do but try to keep your place in formation. Hope you'll be lucky.
The 4-engine planes are American. Single engine are German. You are looking at American planes in pictures taken from German gun sight cameras. We are losing a third of the men and planes sent on the mission to Ploiesti. The victorious German fighter pilots buzz their own field. Although we lost the element of surprise, although we suffered heavy losses, although some bombs fell wide of the target, still American bombers destroyed 40% of the cracking capacity at Ploiesti. The raid on Ploiesti was the only single action in the war for which 5 Congressional Medals of Honor were awarded. A limited action on a limited scale. The first blow to Ploiesti was not a decisive one. We had planned 8 raids, but after this one, we did not have the strength to go back. Though the target burned, it still stood. The Germans marched 10,000 slave laborers into the oil fields and began rebuilding Ploiesti immediately. Our bombing produced a high degree of damage, but within 6 months, the cracking capacity of Ploiesti was back to normal. We would have to find another way to destroy it. Eight months later, we called for another strike against Ploiesti. Now we launched another raid from our newly won air bases in Italy. The target still stood. We tried another way to get it. A single raid, larger, stronger. New tactics, fighter cover, part of the way in. The American specialty of high-altitude precision daylight bombardment. We had improved. The Germans had improved too. Their radar screen was more complete. Enemy anti-aircraft had increased in density and accuracy. Enemy fighter strength had risen considerably. Pilots had been brought down from the Western Front. They were experienced and good.
Flying into the rising sun. We came home flying into the setting sun. The sun was in your eyes on your way in and on your way out. And that's where the fighters like to come from, out of the sun, so you can't see them. They like to make a pass from in front of you, where you have less guns and where they hope to knock out the cockpit. This day, about 250 jumped us.
This is a B-17 under attack. Its left wing tank is on fire. The left side of this B-24 is disintegrating. Again, these are films taken from German cameras. The tail surface of this B-17 has been shot away. Over the target, the Germans added the last obstacle, flak and smoke. Smoke from 2,000 smoke pots drifts over Ploesti. Drifts, clouds, obscures the target. There was nothing to do but drop our bombs into the smoke and hope by some chance they hit the refinery below. As the smoke blew away, the flyers saw that they had sent many of their bombs into the fields and farms surrounding the oil refineries. Though the target burned, it still stood. We would have to find yet another way to destroy it. We had to get under the smoke. We went back to the tactics of the first raid, back to low-level bombing and a surprise attack. But instead of heavy bombers, we would try to do it with fighters. P-38s with 1,000-pound bombs strapped below a wing. They buzzed the Balkans, climbed for altitude. They stripped their wing tanks and went in, dive bombing. Ploesti burned, but 30% of the planes did not come back, and the target still stood. Ploesti stood and shipped its oil to the German fighting machine. If we wanted this target, we had to find still another way to get it. We had to find another way to use air power. The trouble was there were only so many bombers, and everyone wanted them for a different purpose. The British wanted to wreck the Continental Railroad net. The ground forces wanted the bombers to support their plans for the forthcoming invasion of the continent. The Air Force itself was split. Some officers wanted us to concentrate on fighter factories and ball bearing plants in order to defeat the German Air Force. But in June 1944, the decision was made. In spite of German opposition, in spite of opposition from some Allied officers, we would make oil the primary target of the Air Force. Not by sneak raids or one-time shots, but by mounting a siege. Only in this way could such an extensive target be destroyed. We would mount whatever planes we had and fly day after day over the oil refineries. Now we went out in strength, knowing the Germans waited in strength. We would take what we had to take from flak. Each black smudge is a sphere of exploding steel some 20 yards across. The Germans were accurate. Sometimes they aimed directly at the planes. Sometimes they threw up a box barrage and let the planes fly into it. We would take what we had to take from flak, and when the flak stopped, the fighters came in. We would take what we had to take from them. This B-17 is out of control and on fire within the fuselage. It starts to spin in and then explodes. No parachutes. Another B-24 on fire, 10 men aboard. Count the parachutes. 1, 2, we would take what we had to take and give what we had to give in prisoners, in broken airplanes, in wounded men chopped from the wreckage. Men took what they had to take. Some men gave everything they had to give. It was expensive, but Ployasti was toppling. We had come to knowledge only combat could teach. Now long-range fighters were available, able to accompany the bombers all the way to the targets and all the way back. These are German planes seen from American gun sight cameras. Now a perfected radar bomb sight could see the ground through the smoke. We sat over Ploiesti day after day and dropped ton after ton. We had learned that this was the only way to do it, to mount a siege and give everything we had to give. We gave Ploiesti 27 million pounds of bombs. Day after day, ton after ton. A year and a fortnight after the first raid, Ploiesti lay useless and prone. It burned for the last time. When this oil field stopped production, the German war machine began to run down. The death of the oil fields was, by German admission, the most powerful blow struck by the Air Force.
As at Ploiesti, one of the continuing objectives of American air power was to destroy the enemy's capacity to make war. Toward that end, England became virtually one great aircraft carrier from which hundreds upon hundreds of warplanes were launched to attack the enemy's industrial centers in Europe. Let's go back now to October 1943 and join the United States 8th Air Force as it prepares for a mission.
All over England, the bombers are made ready. In 1943, this plane is a giant among bombers. An air crew of 10 men fly it, and a ground crew of 10 men service it. The newspapers call it the Flying Fortress. The airmen call it the 17. Heavily armored, carrying a heavy bomb load, its mission is to destroy the industrial complexes of Germany. The mission has not yet been accomplished. While the ground crews ready the bombers, the flight crews are briefed.
You never know where you're going until the briefing session begins. Of course, you hope for the easy ones, where the fighters can cover you all the way in and out. Milk runs. But this day it's deep, real deep. When this major pulls up the curtain, that black line goes way into Germany. And way into you. The town is called Schweinfurt. And for an hour, they tell you how to get there and back.
It should be easily identified by the airfield adjoining.
Okay, boys, today we're going to escort 10 boxes of bombers, 36 ships to each wing.
The 80th will be high group and the 764th will be low group. Remember that your biggest enemy is still the single-engine fighter plane. Now, you bombardiers, take your time in going in on your releases. But don't allow the flak to worry you. Men, the going's going to be rough. You're going to have to pull your necks in there and stay in there and pitch every minute.
Now, gentlemen, this is the type of target you don't want to have to go back after the second time.
Schweinfurt is the center of the German ball bearing industry. Every machine that moves in war moves on ball bearings. Therefore, Schweinfurt is a #1 priority target. This target lies deep in Germany, and the deeper the target, the stronger the German defenses. Deep penetrations into Germany are costing the Americans many bombers. The bombers must go deep, for if strategic bombardment is to be successful, the whole of Germany must be reached. The future of strategic bombardment may rest on this mission and these planes. At 12:40 in the afternoon, a German patrol boat in the English Channel discovers the American bomber stream. The Germans radio a warning. German Central Control in Berlin begins to plot the track of the American bombers. The German defense system alerts the whole German Air Force as far north as the Baltic. German early warning has guessed the bombers are heading deep into Germany, but they cannot decide which city will be the probable target. They think it may be Frankfurt, but they wait for a half hour before committing the German fighters. At 1:10 in the afternoon, Radio Central flashes a decision to intercept at the German border. In a short time, the fight will begin.
Top secret. Estimate of German Air Force capabilities, 14 October 1943. At the present time, there is no indication that the Allies have won superiority in the air. The Luftwaffe's strength has substantially increased in the last few months. It has approximately 1,002 first-line day fighters capable of effective opposition on the Western Front. The Me-109G must be classed as one of the best fighters in the world, and production is increasing. The success of their rocket-firing aircraft will lead to continued and aggressive rocket attacks. New Luftwaffe fighter control tactics have resulted in maximum usage of the German fighter force. As we penetrate deeper into Germany, it must be expected that enemy fighters will have time to attack, land, refuel, and re-attack our withdrawing forces. It is clear that long-range American fighters are needed to protect our bombers all the way to the target and back. These fighters have not arrived in strength in this theater. We must rely on tight formation flying and mutual firepower as our sole support for deep penetrations.
Fighter escort breaking up. Now keep an eye out for Jerry, he's due. Top turret, you see anything yet? Nothing yet, sir. All right, keep your eye on the sun. Yes, sir. Rocky, anything there? Nothing below us, sir. Nothing on the left. Nothing on the right. Maybe they stayed home. Maybe the war's over. Yeah, I bet you this will be a real milk run. All right, can the chatter. Looks like Contrails, 5 o'clock. Just report him when you see him. I see him, 4109, 6 o'clock high. Lefty, they're yours first. Lead him, Lenny. See yours first. Here he comes, 5 o'clock high. There goes the B-17 out of formation. Check the chutes in that cripple. There goes one out of the waist. Come on, you guys, jump. Another man come out of the nose. 3, 4, 5. One more out of the waist, that's 6. Man still in the cripple. Come on, you guys, jump. She's falling off in the right wing. She's spitting in now. FW's 3 o'clock high. They're coming in. Sam, he's flying till he goes under. I'll pick him up on the other side. They're ready. Short burst. Don't wait. Just talk slow.
German fighters attacked the bombers head-on, rolling through the formation. In this way, they hoped to kill the American pilots, thus disabling the bombers. There are some attacks from the rear, but the tail and flanks of the American bombers are generally well protected. As soon as an American bomber leaves the formation, the German fighters attack it in waves. The American bombers are under orders not to break formation. A rescuing plane becomes vulnerable the moment it leaves formation. The wounded planes must fight by themselves. On the way to the target, the Americans lose 28 planes, 280 men. Air battle goes on, there is little time to take care of the wounded.
Coming in level at 6. 2 FWs coming through at 11 o'clock. Now watch them, left wing, watch it. 4 bandits coming up from the tail, 6 o'clock, low. They're coming in from all around the clock now. I see 4, 5, 6 FWs at 12 o'clock high. They're going after the ring. This guy's full of them. Fighters are breaking away here. Flag's coming up at 12 o'clock level. Man, oh man, just look at that flag.
Solid enough to walk on.
Navigator and pilot approaching the IP. That's Wertheim over there. Hey, Bill, how about a little evasive action before the bomb run? Oh, Pappas, just feather number 1.
When the bombers reach the target area, each plane is set on automatic controls. The bomb sight and the bombardier are flying the aircraft. For accuracy's sake, the approach to the target must be straight and level. No evasive action can be taken. These last moments are the most vulnerable minutes of the mission. Although the planes are under intensive anti-aircraft fire, the bombardiers must be precise and accurate. Visibility is good, the target is exposed. Bombs hit and the ball bearing plants at Schweinfurt are shrouded in smoke.
Let's take us some evasive action. Roger, hang on. Let's jog you around a little. Hope we don't have to do a 360. Let's get out of here. Clear the intercom. Some fighters over there on the other side of that flag. 4 of them at 3 o'clock coming around to 6. Another port in trouble. It's McGrath. Watch your one tonight at 10 o'clock. Don't fire until you get him in range. All right, let me have it. I got it! My God, did you see that thing explode? My oxygen is out back here. Hey, FW, come in.
I don't care who you are. Every man is scared he'll be yellow in battle. Every man's afraid he'll chicken out. And at Schweinfurt, some men did flip, some crying on the interphone, some so frozen with fear they couldn't fire their guns. But fewer than you'd expect, just a few. It wasn't real. The cold tearing at you. The roar of the engines. The sky full of junk and parachutes. Death all around you. After a while, instead of the battle aiming at you, it was something you were watching. That's how your mind protects itself. That's what bravery is.
Now. Keep your eyes peeled for enemy fighters. Nothing back here, sir. Looks like they've all gone home.
The survivors of the fighters and the flak headed home. Some came back badly mauled, parts of planes shot away. Some came in without wheels, belly to the runway. Many brought home crew members dead or wounded. The cost of the raid against Schweinfurt was high. Of every 10 bombers that left here, only 7 returned. 30% of the men were casualties. To set the scene for our next story about the use of air power in World War II, let's go back and look at the situation confronting England in those disastrous early years of the war. Its cities and its people had been under constant devastating attacks by German air power, and there was another menace under the seas.
Spring 1941. England stands alone. German air power, unable to force the British to surrender, has been withdrawn to attack Russia. But the assault against Great Britain continues, not with air power, but with sea power. From Hamburg, center of German submarine manufacture, comes the new U-boats. Into the waters of the North Sea slip Type 7 submarines, over 600 tons, carrying 14 torpedoes. The German undersea armada grows to 150 raiders. The mission of the U-boat packs: blockade the British Isles, destroy the Canadian, British, and American convoys that keep Britain alive. Convoy out of Halifax, guarded by the Royal Canadian Navy, steaming only as fast as the slowest ship. Loaded with material and food, easing into the warm Gulf Stream. Wolfpack out of Saint-Nazaire, deploying to meet the convoy, waiting for a smudge of smoke on the horizon. In 1941, the British lose 4 million tons of shipping. In 1941, 7,000 British and Canadian seamen are lost. The Battle of the Atlantic means more than the loss of shipping. It means rationing, tight control of all foodstuffs, queuing up for the steadily diminishing supply of food. By 1943, the ration is a half-pound of sugar per person per week, 2 ounces of tea per person per week, 2 ounces of butter per person per week. The total meat ration, 4 strips of bacon and 2 chops a week. The British eat potatoes instead of meat, but there is no starvation. And the British talk of attack, not defense. The counterblast is at hand. July 1943, Headquarters Bomber Command. The largest airstrike to date is about to begin.
The Met Officer confirms the good weather forecast for tonight, sir.
Right. Then we'll go ahead with our maximum effort. Controller, warn all groups to carry out Operation K tonight.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you ought to see that.
Yes.
Bomber Command to all groups. Targets for tonight. Maximum effort tonight. Town 434, Germany.
Right, sir.
Town 434 is Hamburg. The counterblast is underway, 800 planes strong. 800 bombers aim at the 3,000 industrial plants scattered through Hamburg. 800 bombers will strike the first blow against the city that builds almost half of Germany's submarines.
Beginning to cloud up a business.
From France to Denmark, the German anti-aircraft positions are manned and ready. German night fighter pilots are in their ready rooms, but on this night, something has gone wrong with the German early warning system. German radar is giving a confused signal. The British are dropping tinfoil and jamming the German radar defenses. Ground observers hear the British planes overhead, a general alarm is sounded. But the reports are contradictory. The Germans cannot decide which city will be the target. A secondary alert is sounded throughout northwest Germany. The German night fighters are alerted. The British are somewhere over Germany. Perhaps these planes can find them by visual contact. The best the defenders can do is guess, and they guess the wrong city. The night fighters are sent to defend Berlin.
Nach lange kann es aber nicht mehr dauern. Die Verbände stehen ja schon kurz vor der holländischen Küste.
The clouds protect the British planes from visual detection, but the clouds may obscure the target. Special planes, pathfinders, will drop through the cloud cover and illuminate Hamburg with flares. At 11:44, the pathfinder planes begin their descent into the cloud cover.
Okay, stand by. I'm going in a glide. doors open. Left, left. Steady. Right. Steady. Steady at that. Bomb's going.
Flares clearly illuminate the targets. Now the formations come in through heavy flak concentration. The bomber stream has no trouble seeing the target. The center of the city is aflame. Each small light is a fire. In the center of Hamburg, the temperature is over 1,800 degrees. Steel girders melt under the heat. The fire is so intense that winds of cyclone proportions, over 150 miles an hour, roar through the city. Winds carry the fires into the outskirts of Hamburg. Only in the suburbs can the Germans muster firefighting defenses. In the morning, the city is dazed. At first, the enormity of the destruction is not realized. A few people set about the task of cleaning up. A few people begin to leave Hamburg. High Nazi officials arrive from Berlin, and the city officials set up food kitchens. In the late morning, rescue efforts began to set free thousands of people trapped in underground bunkers. 20,000 persons will be killed in the raids on Hamburg. It was not until 2 o'clock in the afternoon that the people of the city broke down. Suddenly, the hysteria became panic. Civil laws broke down, and the people of Hamburg began to loot homes and stores. The looting went on until 3:37 in the afternoon. At 3:37, the alarms sound again. The Americans are coming. The Americans by day, the British by night. Round-the-clock bombing. The war has come to the German people.
The death and destruction that rained from the skies over Europe during World War II took a dramatic new turn on June 13, 1944. On that day, Vergeltung 1, Vengeance Weapon Number 1, V1, was fired against England by Adolf Hitler. The world would be forever different. The day of the missile had dawned.
This is Peenemünde, Germany's top-secret rocket research facility in the marshes and sand dunes near the Baltic Sea. Here in 1937 and 38, the guided missile is moving from the drawing boards to reality. The Germans, defeated in World War I and restricted by the Treaty of Versailles, turned to new arms. Military rocketry experiments started as early as 1929, before Hitler's rise to power. By 1932, Walter Dornberger had gathered around him in the Army Weapons Department a specialist staff, headed by a 19-year-old prodigy, Wernher von Braun, a name now famous in the unfinished narrative of space flight. Like all pioneering, the way at first is hard. The Germans are reaching toward the infinite. Money is sparse, scoffing general. Little is known about the exotic science of missiles and liquid-propelled rockets. Von Braun and his assistants dabble like ancient magicians in volatile, explosive, and powerful chemicals. Slowly but steadily, at Peenemünde, in the machine shops, in the laboratories, on the test stands, the resurgent military strength of the Third Reich is developing the strange new technology of the 20th century. Germany is moving, though with little urgency, toward the new era of robot war. The long years of effort pay off in prototypes of the weapons of tomorrow. At test stands at Peenemünde and elsewhere in Germany, giant rockets are nursed and tended, cradled in steel. The birds are about to fly. Not all the tests are failures. The Germans learn by trial and error. In 1939, the year when World War II starts and the lights go out in Europe, Hitler witnesses for the first time the progress achieved in the development of liquid-propelled rockets. He is unimpressed. He does not grasp the meaning of tomorrow. Well, he says casually in departure, es war doch gewaltig. It was grand. And so the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler, which is to last 1,000 years, builds torpedoes, piloted planes, armored cars, guns and tanks and submarines, old weapons of new design, a conventional war machine with unconventional tactics, geared to conquest built upon blitzkrieg, the dive bomber, and the tank. The missile has no place in Hitler's strategy. Germany prepares for war while Peenemünde carries on in the backwash of history, and the appeasers are asking, Who wants to die for Danzig? Der Feldzug der 18 Tage, the campaign of the 18 days. The Blitz commences in Poland in that somber September of 1939. Hitler starts upon the paths of conquest. Spearhead of the Blitzkriegs in Poland, in the Low Countries, in France, is the powerful German Air Force. Its crack pilots, flushed with victory, are certain of their invincibility. Tomorrow, the world. The arrogant Hitler prepares for the final step. Invasion of Britain, Operation Sea Lion. Reichsmarschall Hermann Goering gives the order. The Luftwaffe will crush Britain from the air as a vital prelude to amphibious and paratroop attack. Certain that his war machine is supreme, Hitler strikes the long-range rocket from the list of military priorities. Peenemünde, cradle of future weaponry, is forgotten and forlorn. Wir fahren gegen England. We are sailing against England, resounds across Germany. In August 1940, the Battle of Britain opens. Hitler hurls 2,300 planes into the Adlerangriff, the Eagle attack, against 704 British fighters. The Luftwaffe is contemptuously confident. Beaten back in the skies over Britain, bogged down in the steppes of Russia, Hitler revises his strategy and, with his staff, reappraises his weapons. To report on the progress made in the development of the vengeance weapons, the missiles, Albert Speer, Minister of Armaments, is sent to Peenemünde by the Fuhrer. He sees first the V-1, or small pilotless flying bomb, with 25-foot wingspan, a speed of more than 350 miles an hour, ceiling of 6,000 feet, and range enough to reach England from the Channel coast. The timing device, lower right, is superimposed in these German films to aid technical research. And then Vengeance Weapon 2. Walter Dornberger shows Speer his major project, a giant rocket taller than a 3-story house. It arches 50 miles above the Earth, moves at 3,400 miles an hour, and has a range of 200 miles. Speer is impressed. He tells the Peenemünde scientists that he will urge Hitler to give top priority again to both V-1 and V-2. Speer reports to the Fuhrer, and by July 1943, Hitler is at last convinced. Peenemünde and its family of robot missiles are given top priority. What I want, says Hitler, is annihilation, annihilating effect. Peenemünde expands its facilities in the great push its scientists have been waiting for. The die is cast. The British, worried by disturbing reports from secret agents, start the greatest aerial reconnaissance effort of the war. A photograph which will forever have its place in history reveals one of the world's great secrets. A British intelligence officer discovers in a photo of Peenemünde a tiny shadow of a launching ramp and a V-1 upon it. Irrefutable confirmation of fantastic weapons. The British people are not told, but the Royal Air Force is ordered to bomb Peenemünde and the entire German missile system. Yet by D-Day, when the Allies storm Normandy, Nazi missile production and site construction are continuing relentlessly despite round-the-clock bombing. Now it becomes a race between the Allied ground advance and the German missile threat, a race in which Hitler wins the first heat. The V-1s are launched against London. A new chapter opens, the Battle of the Flying Bombs. The Allied invasion forces Hitler's hand before he is fully ready, and from the Channel coast, V-1s rain upon London. Unsuspecting England, battered by 4 years of war, has hoped with Allied air control for respite. But it is not to be. The new attack imposes upon the British people a staggering burden. Dawn brought no relief and cloud no comfort against the blind, impersonal enemy that dropped from the skies. Suffering London has to take it. The Allied strategy for victory cannot be imperiled. But the V-1 is a stoppable weapon. The British track it with radar, shoot it down with fighters, check it with a balloon barrage, blast it with guns. Churchill, the indomitable, leads England's successful struggle against the flying bomb. Radar and proximity-fused shells from AA guns are the keystone of defense. Of 8,564 V-1s launched from France against London, about 2,400 reached the city. During that fateful summer of 1944, as the Allied armies drive toward the Rhine, the V-1s are fired against London. It is still a race between the struggling armies advancing on the missile launching sites and the dwindling power of V-1. For Peenemünde, where a mysterious cargo is trucked out with great secrecy, and for Adolf Hitler and his Third Reich, it is now the 11th hour. The V-1 has failed, it is slow, its launching sites are vulnerable, the Allied armies have moved too fast. It is time, high time, for the final desperate card. Hitler's ace is the V-2, the unstoppable weapon. This giant rocket, with its tremendous speed, its elliptical trajectory, which carries it 50 miles into the air, and its great range, is to turn the tide of war. There can be no defense. The V-2 cannot be heard and is but rarely seen before it strikes. And so, on September 8, 1944, the first V-2 is fired against England. With the V-1s defeated, Britain has just announced the Battle of London is won. But here is a new horror from the skies, the deadliest weapon of all, a supersonic rocket which strikes without warning. So again, London burns and shudders. But this time, the beleaguered city has no defense. Its dead and wounded never know what fells them. For the V-2 moves faster than the sound of its approach. No anti-aircraft gun can touch it. No planes exist with even a fifth of its speed. 1,200 V-2s will be fired against London. None will ever be intercepted. The news of V-2 is withheld from the British people. All sorts of fantastic rumors are current. On the first day, it is said a gas main is blown up. Then talk swings to German secret weapons. What kind of weapons, no one knows. Finally, in November 1944, after 2 months, Churchill discloses in Parliament that the German long-range rocket is in action. This time, as at no time before, he knows that defense is hopeless. Again, the battle, a race against time, depends upon the Allied ground armies, tanks and guns and foot sloggers, the big battalions. For suffering London, the only defense is capture of the V-2 launching sites. The troops advance, but the rockets leap skyward, a desperate, maniacal barrage of death and destruction. For 7 long months, as the Allied armies overrun Europe and the awful race of man against missile continues, there reigns upon England a ghastly doom. Had the V-2 been employed 6 months sooner, invasion of Europe would have proved exceedingly difficult, General Eisenhower writes, perhaps impossible. Continue their experiments. They test fire V-9, which they hope to develop into a 3,000-mile missile capable of bombarding the United States. The last V-2 was fired on March 27, 1945, a month before the end. It is too little and too late. Allied armies overrun the launching sites, break the final fanatical resistance, meet upon the Elbe. The Wagnerian finale of the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler comes in a bunker in Berlin, as surrender flags fly from a devastated nation. Allied world goes wild with the heady wine of victory. But peace brings no peace. Those who shout in the streets have never heard of Peenemünde, which might have silenced their cheers. They do not know that Peenemünde has profoundly changed their world. For defeated Germany, it ends where it began. The German missile facilities, shattered by bombing and now a monument to futility, are captured by the Allies. Peenemünde, birthplace of the giant long-range rocket, falls to the Russians with the secrets that have altered history. Now begins Operation Paperclip, the American race to capture the German rocket scientists before the Russians do, a forecast of the United States and Soviet conflict to come. Von Braun, Dornberger, and other leading Peenemünde scientists escape to Bavaria and give themselves up to the Americans.
In the years following the war, rockets carried men into space and to the moon, but also enormous contemporary counterparts, now tipped with nuclear weapons, sit poised primarily in the United States and the Soviet Union, ominously threatening civilization's destruction. That is part of the legacy of the Second World War. Our reports on that tumultuous period of history continue in this ongoing series, the CBS Video Library of World War II. I'm Walter Cronkite.